Kudos. Moving along, we are going into an energy discussion set. Well-crafted energy policies play a key role in driving environmental sustainability. Crucially, this bipartisan support for energy policy is in existence, especially at the state and local level. I think we get a little bit bogged down in some of the national rhetoric, but it's happening. It's local and it's bipartisan, and there's progress being made. So this conversation today will explore the role of local level leaders in supporting policy and also identify some of the stickier issues that create dissonance in energy policy conversations. It's true that each community and locality must design an energy infrastructure that supports their community needs and leverages the available resources, from sun to solar to gas and coal, but there are still national learnings and coordinations to help move us collectively forward. Fortunately, there's the Alliance to Save Energy to support that local national coordination and policymaking progress. And we're here today to hear from Paula Glover. She's the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, and she'll be speaking with the Honorable Kevin S. Parker, New York State Senator and Majority Whip and Chair of the Committee on Energy and Telecommunications. All right, here, popping on in. Great. Paula, Senator Parker, thanks so much for joining us today, and we're looking forward to today's conversation. Over to you.
That you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you now.
Thank you. So, Senator, so good to see you.
Likewise.
A lot about what's happening in California, but you're leading in New York. There is a lot going on in New York, and having come out of the back end of a pandemic, and people being home, and increasing discussions about energy justice and a just energy transition and dealing with resiliency and all the other issues that surround this business. In your role as chairing the Energy and Telecommunications Committee, talking about these issues and policies that need to be developed to kind of address the multitude of problems that need to be handled.
Well, in New York, I think that we were lucky from a political perspective to kind of have Democrats top to bottom in the state. And so to some degree, we have really have a political advantage of having a group of people who are kind of rowing in the same direction, right? And so that's been, it's made it easier over the last couple of years to pass legislation. And so in 2019, we actually passed something called the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, what we lovingly call the CLCPA, which is the most aggressive climate change goals in the entire country. And that now has become the framework in which the entire state operates in terms of climate change. But essentially, when you start taking on climate change goals, it actually affects every thing that you do. And so energy policy in particular has been framed by that. But even before we did CLCPA, we have a multi-state carbon cap and trade program that we lovingly call RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, that's been in place for a number of years. That really kind of set the framework and the temperature for doing something like the Community Leadership and the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. And so right now we're just trying to figure out everything. So everything we're doing now is kind of in that framework and making it kind of live up to the expectations that we all have.
So in the introduction, you talked a little bit about bipartisanship, and we at the Alliance, we are a bipartisan coalition. Bipartisanship is important to us. And if you just watch the news, you would think that bipartisanship is not possible. I believe it is. And so I have a two-parter for you. One, do you think that we can get to solutions that have broad support across the aisle? And then tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing in New York and how you do that work. And the exciting things that you have going on around appliance codes and other things.
I do think that bipartisanship is possible and necessary. In fact, many of the things that we have gotten done in the state, we actually have gotten done when we had a Republican Senate and a Democratic Assembly. And even with a Republican governor, we were able to do, regional greenhouse gas initiative, right? For instance, we fixed our what we call Article 10. It's our power plant siting legislation. So we were able to do many things, but I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of educating legislators. That's really, really important. Unfortunately, what I found, I've been serving in the state Senate for 18 years now, and I've been on the Energy and Telecommunications Committee either as the ranker or the chairman the entire time. And so what I really find is that legislators are no different than most Americans, but we only think about energy during 2 times: once a month when our bill comes, or if there's a service interruption, right? Other than that, people don't really kind of think about energy. And so I think that it's important for us to go in and work with legislators to educate them about energy policy and about its impacts and about the different aspects, whether it's affordability, resilience, savings. All those things have to be kind of taught to legislators, because they, especially in places in which you have term limits, where you're always, maybe every 4 to 8 years, you may be moving members around, either in different houses or in and out of the body. And so we recently have gone through a massive kind of, I guess, restocking of legislators in New York. And so we're in the process of kind of educating folks around some of these issues. And so it's one thing to have intention, but as my father used to tell me all the time, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Is really folks actually understanding implementation and how you implement some of these policies, right? And so, after we've done CLCPA, we really actually ran into the pandemic. And so a lot of the work during the pandemic was really about affordability, and making sure that the system ran correctly, and then doing some consumer issues. And so I think all of us around the country had our eyes on Texas and what happened during Texas, during that cold spell, and wondering and looking at our own systems and saying, if we had a weather event, how well would our grid hold up? But the first order of business for us in the state of New York, frankly, during the pandemic, was to protect consumers. We had stay-at-home orders. People couldn't work. People lost their jobs. Again, no fault of their own. But if you can't pay rent, can't pay your taxes, you certainly can't pay your utility bills. So we actually put forward not 1, but 2 utility moratoriums that protected our consumers, our energy consumers in the state of New York. Really, frankly, utility consumers, because it protected them not just from water, electric, and gas, but also from cable, telephone, as well as internet. And those protections are still in place, frankly, for the next probably about a year. And so we thought it was important to make sure that people had the services that they need, so they can have some time to get themselves back on their feet. And so now we're thinking through, how do you get federal dollars to pay for some of the arrears that some of the consumers have backed up. I have legislation that addresses some of that, looking at a 50-50 kind of 50% federal money and the other 50% coming from the utilities themselves to help, again, address the issues of arrears. But then beyond that, we also put in a number of consumer protections. We just did a omnibus person for what we call the Public Service Commission, just to make sure that there's a consumer advocate, that when rate cases and other issues are coming up that we're dealing with in the context of the Public Service Commission, that there is somebody there who's specifically speaking to the issues of consumers and looking out particularly for low and moderate income New Yorkers. And so that was kind of the second piece. And then third, as we started looking and getting some of those other issues under control, we looked at the economy. And for me, I always have tried to look at energy policy as both a commodity, but also an industry, right? And so in the state of New York, energy is the 6th largest industry in the entire state. It's absolutely critical in terms of our economic mix. And really, when I look at the clean energy economy, it then becomes the next best opportunity to create full-time jobs at a living wage with benefits, particularly for Black and Latino communities, right? Van Jones wrote really good book on this issue called The Green Collar Economy. And so some of the principles that are laid down in that book guide me daily as we start looking at, how do we put people back to work and how do we build a clean energy economy simultaneously.
Thank you. So, as the president of the Alliance to Save Energy, we are about energy efficiency and this energy economy. And as I'm sure you're well aware, energy efficiency is the largest employer in clean energy. And so the question for you is, what should we be doing? What should we be sharing? Who should we be educating about the role that we can play, not just in clean energy, but in economic growth,
Right.
particularly for Black and Brown communities, which, is not only close to you, but obviously very close to me as well.
Right. So in the context, let me go back to first the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, right? CLCPA, which is, again, the framework in which we operate everything in the state of New York. Immediately, everybody started looking at energy generation and saying, well, how do we get to a net zero, climate goal by, 2050, right? And they looked at generation, of course, first. There were three things that I've been talking about, because I think they're the three things that people are paying less attention to. The first of which is vehicles. We have over 2.5 million vehicles in the state of New York that need to be changed into clean energy or alternative energy vehicles in the next 30 years. And then also, and that sounds like a long time, but it really isn't. And then the other thing is that New York is an old state, and so we have old buildings, both commercial and residential, and we need to retrofit those homes and businesses as soon as possible. We have a energy agency here, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority, that has been doing some of that work already, but we still need to continue to support that. And so we're talking about charging stations. We're talking about, how do we do retrofits on buildings? And then the third part for me has been the conservation part. And I think that's a little bit harder. And I think, for me, it kind of circulates around demand response, right? And I think the first piece has to be about educating consumers about demand response. We just simply have to make people smarter about how they use electricity, energy in their house. I'm saying electricity because, I always say we're going to use less energy by using more electricity. And so my head just kind of automatically went to electricity. But people need to understand energy policy just for themselves, and both how they produce less carbon, but also reduce their own energy bills. And so I think that we need to do PSAs. I think that there needs to be a significant amount of work that happens with school children. I am challenging our New York, NYSERDA, and the New York Energy Research and Development Authority, to come up with curriculums that we can put in the schools, because I think certainly as young people and our children become more aware, not only does that become a generational education, but also, all of us have been in situations which children have been, directing us towards being better stewards of the earth. Maybe you threw a piece of paper out the window and your child or, your niece or nephew said, like, why'd you do that? Or, maybe reminded you to cut off the water while you were brushing your teeth, or, those kind of things. And so I think we need to get our young people involved in it, but also develop a consumer-based education around demand response, so that people understand when's the best areas to save money for themselves. But then also they also need to be better educated about the programs. Every state has tons of weatherization and installation programs and energy help programs that frankly, the folks in our communities are not using. And we just need to do a much better job at educating our populace around what's available from state and city agencies as it relates to energy savings.
Senator Parker, thank you so much. I'm a poor replacement for Paula Glover over here, but I wanted to say thank you for those really salient recommendations. I know when I was a young kid, there was a Sesame infomercial or song about like not wasting water.
Right.
And that has stuck with me throughout my entire life, to the point that I bring it up in professional conversations like this. So absolutely love that. Start with the kids, and hopefully that creates generational changes. And so thank you for being in the position you are, pushing forward this